The Lasari woman stood on the pedestal, silent and unmoving, her long, elven ears catching the cold artificial breeze that drifted through the victory hall of the Resolute Wing. She was barefoot, cloaked in pale fabric that shimmered faintly with motion-reactive nanothreads, and not one of the attending admirals or dignitaries seemed to notice that she was staring directly at Rylan Voss. Rylan didn't like to be stared at, especially not by gifts. He stood stiffly in his creaking uniform, sweat clinging to the inside of his collar, as spotlights heated the stage floor to something just below volcanic. His mechanical shoulder, the one salvaged from 3 missions ago, had started to twitch, a nervous tick that made the sleeve pulse in rhythmic irritation. Beside him, Admiral Coral had just finished his long and thoroughly unnecessary speech about peace, triumph, and the enduring bond of warforged species. Then came the part that twisted Ryland's stomach into something resembling an imploded star. "In honor of your valor," Coral declared, "the Lasari, as part of the Surrender Concord, have offered this symbolic tribute." There was a whisper of sound, gasps from the lower ranks, the squeak of a diplomat's chair as someone leaned forward too eagerly. The alien woman stepped off the pedestal and walked, no, glided, toward Rylan, her tiny feet soundless on the polished black floor. She didn't even blink. Her height barely reached his waist. She bowed at the knee, then lifted her head and said, in perfect standard, "I am Sale. I belong to you." Rylan took 3 full seconds to process the sentence, then another 2 to reject it completely. "You? What?" he said, loudly, loud enough that someone in the back snorted. Nope. What the hell is this?" "It's symbolic," Coral muttered, leaning toward him with a diplomatic smile that looked more like indigestion. "A ceremonial offering. She's a person. She's a Lasari. I'm not interested in war souvenirs, Admiral. You're embarrassing the brass." Rylan turned fully toward Sayal, looking down at her delicate features in impassive expression. She looked back up at him with the intensity of someone evaluating whether or not she could kill him with a pencil. It wasn't out of the question. Her ears twitched. "You don't belong to me," he said, slow and deliberate, every word like a landmine. "You don't belong to anyone." She blinked once. "I respectfully disagree." The audience laughed, thinking it a joke. Rylan did not laugh. Sale didn't either. In fact, she stepped forward again, took his hand without asking, and placed something small and metallic in it. A ring. Old, made of twisted Lasari alloy. Cold as vacuum. He flinched. "What is this?" "The signet of accord," she said. "I don't want a signet." "Unfortunate. It accepted you." It was at that point Rylan turned to walk off the stage, muttering curses not fit for intergalactic broadcasts. He didn't stop when Coral called his name. He didn't stop when the crowd began whispering. He only stopped when he realized Sayal was still following him, her bare feet padding silently behind him, down the corridors of the ship like a particularly smug cat. "You can't come with me," he said without turning around. "Yes, I can. I'm serious. So am I. I'm going home. To Earth. You stay here. With your people. They surrendered. I have no people. You can't just imprint on the first guy who refuses to own you. You were chosen." "Number I was," Volan told. "Big difference." She gave a shrug, a very human one, which Rylan found instantly suspicious. "My vow is made. My life is yours to protect. I don't want that responsibility. You already have it. Look," she pointed to the ring still in his hand. It glowed faintly now. "It's bonded. Then I'll throw it in the sun. It'll come back." "You sound disturbingly confident about that." "I'm disturbingly confident about many things." They had reached the docking bay. Rylan thumbed his clearance into the ship AI and waited for the airlock to cycle. His ship, a dented but trusty corvette named Grumblejack, spun idly behind the energy shields like a sulking dog. Rylan tried not to sigh too hard. "Fine," he muttered. "Come aboard. But the moment I find someone with a Lysari unbonding ritual, we're doing it. With lasers, if necessary." "I'll bring candles," she said, utterly straight-faced. The ship's AI greeted them with its usual charm. "Welcome aboard, Commander Voss. I detect an unauthorized life form. Shall I incinerate?" "Not yet," Rylan said. "Let her poke around. She'll probably get bored and leave. I am incapable of boredom, Sale replied, already inspecting the weapons console with a disapproving hum. Why does this have 3 safety overrides? So it doesn't kill me. I see. Inefficient design. Rylan rubbed his face. Great. She's a critic, too. They launched within the hour. Rylan thought she might sleep. She didn't. She climbed into the main storage locker and reconfigured it into what she called a resting cocoon. He checked later and found the locker full of repurposed uniforms, dry socks, and an empty protein bar wrapper folded into a miniature chair. 2 days into the flight, he woke up to find her meditating upside down on the ceiling. No gravity boots, no harness, just her and whatever Lasari trick allowed her to ignore Newton. Do you have to do that there? Yes. Why? I like the hum of your refrigeration unit. It sings of stability. It sings of dying coolant lines and the fact that I've been too lazy to fix them. She opened one eye. Poetry is poetry. He stared at her. You're going to be the end of me. I hope not, she said. I was told you were a war hero, useful, strong, only moderately broken. I want to be offended, but you're weirdly accurate. I read your file. I don't have a file. Everyone has a file. Some are just more encrypted than others. She floated down, stepped onto the floor, and walked past him toward the cockpit, humming what sounded suspiciously like a Terran pop song from a century ago. He watched her go, then looked at the glowing ring on his palm. This is a nightmare, he muttered. The ring pulsed in agreement. The cabin door squeaked open again, for the 3rd time in 20 minutes. Rylan was almost certain he'd fixed that damn hinge back in orbit, but then again, he was also almost certain he'd flown back to Earth alone. Sayal stepped in, dragging a strip of foil-wrapped nutrient packs like a parade banner. I organized your pantry by viscosity, she said. Rylan stared from the lopsided couch where he nursed a mug of synth coffee in mild regret. You did what now? Viscosity. Liquids in the top drawer, gels in the second. Anything with chunks I placed under quarantine. That's not a pantry system. That's food profiling. She tilted her head, clearly unbothered. The gelatinous packets were staging a coup. He rubbed his face. Outside the reinforced dome, the Montana sky was unusually blue, scattered with drifting clouds and the occasional glint of low-orbit junk burning up. Sale had arrived on Earth precisely 22 hours ago, survived one transport crash, minor, made peace with a suspicious customs AI major, and promptly declared Rylan's cabin her designated territory. No one had questioned it. Not the postal drone, not the 2 surveillance birds that may or may not have been actual birds, and certainly not Rylan's one neighbor, who had taken one look at her ears and run back inside shouting about glitch elves. Rylan sipped his coffee. You know this is temporary. Of course, she said, examining a framed photograph on the mantel. An old war unit, all scowls and mismatched armor. Rylan barely recognizable without his prosthetic shoulder and bad attitude. Until the cosmos shifts and I am summoned to fulfill my greater purpose. You don't actually believe that, right? I also believe you're drinking spoiled synth coffee and too proud to admit it. He looked into the mug, scowled, and drank anyway. It builds character. It builds internal decay. Then I'm very built, Sayel smiled, a small, crooked thing that lasted only a second before she started scanning the fireplace with a small handheld device she had definitely stolen from his tool bench. I'm not hiding ancient Lasari artifacts in my chimney. I wasn't checking for that. I'm measuring ambient neurofrequency. Rylan blinked. Why? Your home has a lingering cognitive imprint. Possibly yours. Possibly the last occupant. There was no last occupant. I built this place. Then your brain has been leaking into the walls. He stood up and took the scanner from her hand. We don't scan houses for ghosts here. We just light candles and mutter about property values. I was hoping for a poltergeist, something to talk to while you sulk. I do not sulk. You sulked for an hour after I reorganized your toolkit. You alphabetized my wrenches. You should be thanking me. You'll never misplace your Xenon torque spanner again. I didn't even know I owned a Xenon torque spanner. You do. It was behind the coffee machine. They stared at each other. Then, as if by mutual agreement, They both sat, he back on the couch, she cross-legged on the rug like a very tiny, overly curious diplomat. A silence settled between them, interrupted only by the whir of the cabin's old cooling system, groaning to life like a dying walrus. She spoke first. "You really don't want me here," Rylan sighed. "It's not that. It is. You resent the bond. I resent being handed a person like a commemorative mug." She tilted her head again, a little slower this time. "You think I don't resent it too?" He looked up. For the first time, her voice carried no lilt, no clever undertone, just quiet weight. "I'm not a gift," she said. "I'm a legacy no one wanted. I chose you because, well, you looked like someone who'd break it before you kept it." Rylan almost smiled. Almost. "That's fair." They sat in silence again. He watched a dust mote drift lazily through the beam of sunlight cutting across the floor. Somewhere deep in the corner of the room, the cleaning bot beeped softly, tried to eat a sock, and quietly gave up. "So what now?" he asked. She shrugged. "You let me stay until I figure out what I'm supposed to do. And if I say no, I'd still stay, just with more sneaking. You're not very good at sneaking. You hum while you do it. It calms the floorboards." Rylan laughed. It escaped without permission, awkward and dry, and way too loud in the quiet room. Sale smiled again, this time wider. Later that evening, Rylan tried to cook. Sale offered to help. The result was a protein mash that was technically food, if one suspended all culinary standards and forgave salt for existing. Sale called it war porridge. Rylan called it betrayal with a spoon. They ate in front of the monitor, watching old reruns of a detective series that featured psychic cats and time crimes. Sal insisted it was an accurate depiction of Terran law enforcement. Rylan tried to correct her, failed, and eventually admitted that episode 7 had a disturbingly realistic tax audit subplot. By the time the stars came out, the cabin lights had dimmed. Sale curled into her makeshift drawer bed with a thermal blanket and 3 stolen socks. Rylan stood by the window, looking out at the fields. He felt her presence before she spoke. "Do you miss it?" she asked softly. "The war?" The purpose." He took his time answering. "I miss knowing who the enemy was. And now? Now I'm not sure if I'm the good guy anymore." Sale nodded once. "You still are." He looked back at her. "That confidence again." Just observation." He snorted. "Well, let me know if you observe any coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil." "Deal," she said, already drifting off. "But you'll have to teach me how to make the hum come back." "What hum?" "The one in the fridge. It stopped today. I think it's mad." Rylan smiled, just a little. "It'll come back. Everything does eventually." And in the quiet hum of half-sleep, Sale whispered, "I hope so." At precisely 4:17 Earth Standard Time, Rylan Voss woke up to an alarm he hadn't programmed. It wasn't the usual dull chime of a cabin intrusion warning, or the irritating chirp of the heating coil shorting out again. This alarm was sharp, rhythmic, and distressingly upbeat, a kind of melodic warble layered over a beat that reminded him of something a Lissari might hum while casually dismantling a reactor core. He stumbled out of bed wearing one boot and a blanket. The lights were already flickering in disapproval. "Grumblejack," he muttered. "Status report." The ship's voice answered in a tired monotone. "There is an unauthorized uplink to your internal systems. Source, living room. Intent, unknown. Suspected malware." Define malware. Alien ceremonial bonding ritual. With music, Rylan rounded the corner into the lounge and found Sael balancing precariously on the back of the couch. A circle of luminous glyphs shimmered on the floor, hovering about 3 inches above the carpet. The air smelled faintly of ozone and cooked marshmallows. "What the hell are you doing?" "I'm awakening the house's latent intelligence." He squinted. "By hacking my stereo?" "By binding it to a song of invitation. All Lissari homes are taught to listen. This isn't a Lissari home. This is a Terran, highly flammable, suspiciously leaking cabin in the woods." She grinned. "Not anymore." Rylan opened his mouth to respond, but the stereo let out a happy beep and repeated the warble. The lights blinked in sequence. The fridge began to hum again, louder this time, in what Rylan could only describe as harmony. "You gave my appliances feelings," he said, horrified. "I gave them attention. There's a difference." There was a long silence broken only by the air purifier joining in with a deep, mournful whir. "Okay," he said, gesturing wildly. "Turn it off. Whatever this is, turn it off before the toaster starts singing." Sale hopped down gracefully. "The ritual's done. The dwelling is acknowledged." "The dwelling? This hovel is going to get uppity. You've made it feel seen. Good, all things deserve recognition. Not my coffee maker. It doesn't even work." "It does now," she said. "I fixed it." Rylan froze. "How?" "I sang to it." "That's not fixing. That's witchcraft." She winked. "To your people, maybe." He walked over to the stereo, now softly glowing with an extra glyph on its display screen. "And what exactly does this do now?" "It responds to emotional shifts in its inhabitants. If you're angry, it will play soothing tones. If you're sad, it may offer a warm light show. What if I'm hungry? It will hum the soup tone. I swear, if this place starts mood lighting me into a coma, I'm uninstalling your entire species." She laughed, climbed back onto the couch, and stretched like a smug cat. "You'd miss me." Rylan didn't answer. He sat down beside her, grumbling under his breath while the stereo played something suspiciously like a lullaby made of string instruments and whale calls. 2 hours later, the hum of peace was shattered again, this time by an alert from the old comms panel in the corner. Sael's ears twitched before Rylan even turned toward it. "Someone's calling you," she said. "Yeah, that's never good." He dragged himself over and jabbed the blinking key. The screen crackled before resolving into the stern face of Director Hallis, a woman who looked like she hadn't slept since the War of the Eight Suns. "Voss," she said, "I need you back in orbit." He blinked. "I'm retired. You're also bonded to a Lasari diplomatic asset who just woke up a house." He frowned. "That was incredibly fast intel." "Don't flatter yourself. We've been tracking ambient anomalies since you brought her to Earth. Someone noticed when your coffee machine developed a soul." Rylan glanced over his shoulder at Sael, who gave him an innocent look while sipping a suspiciously perfect cup of coffee. "What's this about?" he asked the screen. "There's a Lasari priestess en route to Earth, not from the Surrender faction. Independent. Rogue. I thought the Lasari surrendered. Most did. This one didn't. What's she want? To reclaim the bonded one. By force, if necessary." Rylan narrowed his eyes. "Why now?" "She's tracking the Accord ring." He looked down. The ring on his hand shimmered faintly, its lines pulsing like a heartbeat. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," Hallis said, "but you're the only one she'll speak to. Because I'm bonded. Because you're annoying enough to argue with a war priestess and stubborn enough to win." The screen flicked off without ceremony. Rylan sighed and turned back toward the couch. Sale was already standing, one hand on her hip, the other casually resting on the pulse blade hilt she'd stitched into her sock drawer last week. "So," she said, "we're leaving? You knew this would happen. I hoped." He rubbed his eyes. "What else haven't you told me?" "A few things. Nothing explosive." "Define explosive in your culture." "Anything that causes molecular reconfiguration above 500 kelvins. That's more than a few things." She stepped forward, watching him with that unreadable expression. "You could still walk away. Let the envoy take me." "And let the toaster grieve? Not happening. You're making a joke. Only to hide the part where I'm already packing." He turned to the supply locker and opened it. The old gear was still there. Plasma jacket, boots, that ridiculous Terran Lasari translation visor that made everyone sound like they were underwater. He tossed it aside. Sale stepped closer. "You don't have to protect me." "Yeah," he muttered, "but I'm starting to want to." She paused, her voice quieter. "Even if I'm a war souvenir?" He looked back, met her eyes. "Number, you're a war survivor." The stereo beeped softly and played the soup tone. Neither of them dared acknowledge it. The ship shuddered hard enough to knock Rylan off balance and into the emergency rations cabinet, which then refused to let him go, without also offering him 3 packets of algae paste and something labeled thermal beans, not for human use. Sail caught herself mid-float, her fingers latching onto the overhead rail like it was second nature. Because for her, it was. Is the landing supposed to feel like someone shaking a vending machine? Rylan grunted, trying to disentangle himself from the clingy grip of the bean packs. Not unless you skip the deceleration cycle, Sail replied, tapping at the console with practiced calm. I didn't skip it. I overrode it. Ah, so the crash was a choice. It was a tactical arrival. She rolled her eyes and toggled the stabilizers. Outside the viewport, the orbiting Lissari vessel loomed like a patient predator, sleek, silver, and humming at a frequency Rylan could feel in his molars. The envoy had sent an invitation. That's what the message had called it. An invitation, decorated with ceremonial glyphs and about 20 different kinds of veiled threats. Rylan stepped up beside Sail and studied the vessel. Looks friendlier than I expected. That's how Lissari warships trick you. They're beautiful until they unfold. Unfold? Sail gave him a sidelong glance. Did I not mention the wings? Wings? She gestured calmly toward the ship, just as the silvery plates on either side unfurled like petals, revealing arrays of glowing prismatic veins. There. Oh, Rylan muttered. That's not alarming at all. Very diplomatic. It's the ceremonial equivalent of flexing your biceps during a peace talk. A chime echoed through the cabin, dissonant and lingering, like someone ringing a bell underwater. Rylan raised an eyebrow. They're requesting dock sequence, Sail said. Great, let's go shake hands with the angry space nun. They made the approach slowly. Rylan, still sore from his tactical crash landing, strapped himself into the docking bay harness while Sail floated beside him. Her posture relaxed as if she weren't about to walk into a diplomatic standoff that could ignite an interstellar incident. You sure she wants you back? He asked. She doesn't want me back, Sail said. She wants what I represent. Rylan stared. And what's that exactly? A deviation, an unfinished oath, a thread cut too early. Great, so she's a metaphorical nightmare and a literal one. The Lissari ship's airlock opened with a hiss and a ripple of violet light. The interior was dark, save for a pathway of glowing floor panels that lit one by one as they stepped aboard. Rylan muttered something under his breath about dramatic lighting budgets. At the end of the corridor stood the envoy. She was taller than Sail, her robes woven with filament thread that shimmered with solar flare hues. Her long ears bore ceremonial markings, and her eyes glowed faintly with a shade Rylan had never seen before. Something between amber and threat. Sailin, the envoy said, her voice like silk pulled taut. You've grown undisciplined. Sail stepped forward, expression unreadable. I've grown free. You mistake decay for freedom. Rylan leaned sideways toward Sail. This is going well. The envoy's gaze flicked to him. And you, the human. They said you would be cruder. I wore deodorant for this, Rylan offered. The envoy did not blink. You were given a relic, a living key. She's not a relic. She is bound, and so are you. Rylan looked at Sail, who didn't flinch, didn't even shift. You want her back, Rylan said. To what end? She carries the covenant of the fifth echo. She is our last link to the pre-severance path. Her bond was not meant for flesh, Sail exhaled. And yet here I am, bonded to a sarcastic Terran with a toaster that hums lullabies? Rylan grinned. And soup tones? Don't forget the soup tones. The envoy stepped closer, the ship subtly darkening behind her, as if even the walls deferred. This union is a mockery. You can still choose absolution. Step away, relinquish her, and let the stars judge no more. Rylan paused. Then, with perfect timing, his communicator crackled with the unmistakable voice of his home AI. Commander Voss, said Grumblejack, the toaster has caught fire. Repeating, toaster on fire. Emotional reason, abandonment issues. The silence that followed was heavy. Rylan cleared his throat. Sorry, my house is emotionally volatile. The envoy stared at him. You'll have to excuse the dramatic timing, he added. The appliances are still adjusting. Sael smothered a laugh, which only seemed to further confuse the envoy. You're bonded, the Lasari woman said again. Do you even understand what that means? Rylan looked at Sael. She looked back. There was no fear in her, just presence. She belonged in the moment, entirely. I don't, Rylan admitted, but I know it's real, and I know I didn't choose it. Not exactly, but I've chosen her. Again, every day since. The envoy was silent. Then she spoke, voice lower, but no less dangerous. You defy the order, the cycle, the teachings. I also defy seatbelt warnings and nutritional guidelines, Rylan replied. I'm on a bit of a streak. She looked to Sael. You have until the next phase of moonlight, then I come again, and I will not come alone. With a flick of her hand, the corridor dimmed, and a glowing path reappeared, leading them out. As they walked, Rylan muttered, I don't like how she said not alone. That usually involves teeth, or lasers. Sael glanced over. Sometimes both. They returned to their ship in silence, the mood low but the tension oddly brittle, thin like a thread waiting to snap or resolve into music. I guess we've got a deadline now, Rylan said, buckling into the pilot seat. Deadlines are just invitations for heroism, Sael replied, buckling beside him, or for dying dramatically. We'll aim for the former. He started the engines. Back to the emotionally unstable cabin? The only one that sings me soup songs, Rylan smirked. And you said you weren't sentimental. I said I wasn't nostalgic. Very different. Their ship slipped away from the Lasari vessel, fading into the stars. Behind them, the envoy watched, unmoving. The petals of her ship folded again, and in the silence of space, war waited politely for its cue. The cabin door opened with a melodramatic hiss that no one had asked for. Rylan stepped inside, half expecting the lights to flash and his emotionally unstable toaster to stage a protest in the foyer. Thankfully, all was quiet, except for the ceiling fan, which had apparently learned to spin in reverse and was now doing so with the smug rhythm of a jazz beat. You see? He called over his shoulder. Home, sweet malfunctioning home. Sael stepped in after him, eyes scanning the room like it was the first time she'd seen it. Did your ventilation system always smell like cinnamon and engine coolant? Number that's new. Probably something it picked up from your ritual of awakening. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the couch develops opinions next. I already asked it how it feels. It prefers firm seating arrangements. Rylan gave her a long look. You talked to the couch? Not talked. Harmonized. Briefly. Next time you harmonize with furniture, let me know. I need time to emotionally prepare. Sael wandered over to the central console and tapped at the readouts. The ship had delivered a quiet alert while they were in orbit, something small but persistent. Anomalous gravitational pings along Earth's upper atmosphere. 3, precisely timed. Not a message, not quite a signature. Rylan joined her, squinting at the data. What's this? They're scanning for the Accord ring. Subtle. Lisery subtlety ends at about 40 kilometers above ground. After that, they send in the harp-shaped death cruisers. Rylan sat down heavily in the chair nearest to her. She said she'd come back at moonrise. That gives us 20 hours. Maybe less. Plenty of time to develop a plan, he said. We don't have a plan. I didn't say it was a good one. She turned toward him, her eyes sharper than usual. She's not just a priestess. Viralis was born into the Echo Temple. Her voice can bend metal. Her gestures are encoded with ancient permissions. She is the old Lasari. And you're the new? I'm something they don't have a word for yet, and that scares them. Rylan leaned back, arms behind his head. Good. Let her be scared. She's not scared of me. Then we'll have to make her scared of us. There was a long pause. You really think we can bluff our way through this? Sael asked. I don't bluff, Rylan replied. I improvise with flair. The console pinged again, this time with an alert from Earth's atmospheric defense net. Unregistered pulse emissions had been detected near the Andes region. Local wildlife stunned. Clouds burned in perfect hexagonal formations. Well, Rylan said, rubbing his face, That's not ominous at all. She's preparing a channel, Sal said quietly. She's going to use the sky to speak. That's a thing? She'll call me with a storm. Have I mentioned how theatrical your people are? We have flair. He stood up. All right. If she wants a performance, let's give her one. They spent the next several hours wiring old ship systems to the cabin's aging infrastructure. Rylan hauled out a pulse barrier generator he'd stolen, liberated, from a crashed drone in the wastes. Sale modified it with Lasari frequency converters, which Rylan immediately dubbed the glitter coils for their unnerving glow. She's not going to like this, Sale warned, calibrating the last of the field parameters. She already doesn't like me. This'll just give her more reasons. The sun was dipping below the horizon when it happened. A low hum, at first mistaken for the wind, but it grew like a whisper traveling through metal. The clouds above twisted unnaturally, forming spirals that pulsed with faint light. Then the voice came, not spoken, but resonated, like it was vibrating directly through Ryland's teeth. Saline of the unbroken thread. You are called. Come forward. Return. Ryland grimaced. I hate that I can taste her voice. Sal stepped outside, her feet bare, her expression unreadable. She lifted her hand and the air around her shimmered. I hear you, Virus, but I do not answer. The storm cracked above. Lightning danced between the coils of sky. Rylan activated the pulse barrier, and the field around the cabin snapped into being with a crack and a pop that singed the grass in a neat circle. Sale turned to him. You do realize if this goes wrong, your entire plumbing system will revolt. Worth it. Above them the clouds parted, not as weather, but as design. A figure descended on a platform of glowing crystal, robes trailing like comets. Viralis. Rylan stepped forward, blaster on his hip, sarcasm loaded. You're early, he said. Moonrise isn't for another 20 minutes. Punctuality's going to ruin your whole intimidation vibe. Viralis didn't even blink. Her eyes found Sale. You desecrate your own name. I rewrote it. You will return. Sale raised her chin. I won't. Then your protector dies. Rylan sighed. You know, I've really come to hate being referred to like a disposable battery. Viralis raised her hand. Energy crackled along her palm, shaped like a spiral glyph. Before she could strike, Sale moved. Not with violence, but with song. One note, clear, piercing, and low. The storm hesitated. The energy shimmered. A second note joined it. The toaster inside the house. Then the couch. Then the stereo. The entire house hummed. Is the furniture singing with you? Rylan asked, eyes wide. They're bound to me, Sale whispered. Same as you. Viralis's energy sputtered. Her platform wavered. The storm coiled back into itself. You don't have power here, Sale said. Not anymore. The priestess descended, feet touching earth. Her eyes searched Sale's, then Rylan's, then the glowing house behind them. This is not over, she said. Does it ever end with your people? Rylan asked. She turned, robes flaring with heat, and vanished into light. The clouds closed again. The night returned to silence. Rylan exhaled, sitting heavily on the steps. So, what now? Sale sat beside him. She'll come again, but next time, not alone. More angry priestesses. Possibly a committee. Rylan groaned. Nothing's worse than a bureaucratic holy war. Sale smiled. The stereo inside played a celebratory soup tone. Rylan stared at the pile of wires, blinking lights, and steaming synth coffee as if one of them might offer an escape clause. None did. The console was fried, again, and now the cabin's AI was looping a tragic ballad in binary beeps that even Sale found melodramatic. I leave you alone for one day, Rylan muttered, and you go full opera mode. The AI beeped twice, aggrieved, wounded, slightly accusatory. I didn't mean you personally, Rylan said, but if you insist on developing a personality, maybe pick one that doesn't throw tantrums when I reboot you. Another beep. Lower, petulant. Was that sulking? Yes, Sale said from the other room. The toaster taught it. I knew I shouldn't have let that thing near the neural grid. Sale emerged, hands streaked with coolant, and sat beside him with a huff that sounded oddly regal considering she had an oil smear across her nose. Rylan glanced at her, then reached over and wiped it off with the corner of his sleeve. She didn't flinch. He still wasn't used to that. Repairs are about 80% complete, she said, but the grav stabilizers are fried. So we're stuck. Until we reroute the tertiary conduits, yes. And if we reroute the tertiary conduits, we'll lose internal climate control. She nodded. So it's escape or heat stroke. Or both, but with flair. Rylan leaned back in his chair and exhaled. Do you think she'll actually come with backup? Viralis, I mean. She meant it, Sale said. She never bluffs. She believes in the sanctity of cycles. In her eyes, I'm not just disobedient. I'm contaminated. Rylan winced. You know, humans used to say that about anyone who danced barefoot or kissed the wrong person. Now we elect them to public office. Sale blinked. You elect barefoot dancers. Well, maybe not well, but the point is, people change. Sal studied him for a moment, her expression softer than usual. You don't have to keep protecting me, she said. I know. But you still do. Someone's got to make sure your ears don't get sunburned. She laughed then, a sound like a bell tuned for gravity. Rylan smiled. The console buzzed again, not from the AI's pity party this time, but from the perimeter sensors. Rylan sat up straight. Proximity alert? No, Sal said, frowning. That's, terrestrial. Local. They both rose and crossed to the viewport. Outside, across the dry scrubland, two figures on hoverbikes approached, their engines kicking up shimmering heat trails. Visitors? Rylan asked. I don't think the local Girl Scouts upgraded to plasma rifles. Definitely not if they're still selling those coconut monstrosities. Sale leaned closer. Wait, I know one of them. The short one. That's Dren. Friend? Depends. Does tried to poison me in a sacred bath count as a misunderstanding? Rylan paused. Let's go with complicated acquaintance. The hoverbikes cut power and coasted to a stop just beyond the cabin's perimeter field. One rider dismounted, a squat Lisseri male with a wide belt of ceremonial feathers and a permanent scowl. The other was taller, face obscured by a visor. Rylan opened the external comms. Hi there, he said, cheerful. If this is a surprise intervention, I should warn you we've already had our weekly existential crisis. Dren's voice crackled through. You mock ceremony. I mock lots of things. Keeps the blood pressure down. You harbor the wayward one. Sale stepped into the visual frame. Hello, Dren. He looked startled for half a second. You live? Contrary to temple predictions. You are summoned. We've been over this, she said. Dren looked at Rylan. The human must not interfere. Rylan shrugged. The human installed a plasma turret on the porch, so that might be awkward. Then he dies. Rylan gave Sale a long look. Your people are really into that consequences thing. She nodded. Ritualistic stubbornness. It's cultural. The taller rider finally removed their visor. A human woman, brown-skinned, grinning, hair coiled into knots that looked like they might house small tools or a medium-sized bird. Heya, she said. Hope I'm not crashing the party. Rylan blinked. Wait, you're human. Last time I checked, she said. You must be Voss. I'm Captain Elira Nomu, Federation liaison, temporarily on loan to the Lissari Peace Accord. Didn't know the Federation was loaning humans now. Only the charismatic ones. Rylan blinked. That's both flattering and suspicious. Sale narrowed her eyes. Why are you here? Officially, Nomu said, to negotiate your peaceful reintegration into Lissari society. And unofficially, Rylan asked. She grinned wider. To see if this whole bonded renegade story is real. Because let me tell you, everyone in orbit is talking about it. Sale looked to Rylan. They think we're a myth. Rylan sighed. We're trending again, aren't we? Nomu took a step forward. Look, I don't care what ancient priestess wants to reenact a cosmic soap opera. What I care about is that you two have become a problem with diplomatic implications. So either we fix that, or I get a promotion when you blow something up. Rylan scratched the back of his neck. She's got Federation humor. This is going to go terribly. Sal crossed her arms. I'm not returning. Didn't think you would, Nomu said. But I am curious about what you are now. And so is every fleet within 6 parsecs. So maybe let's not trigger a war until I can at least file my report. Rylan groaned. Reports? The real enemy? Nomu winked. Come on, soldier. Help me write a good one. As the sun dipped and the wind stirred sand into slow spirals, the strange little cabin at the edge of Earth's forgotten zone now held something new. Witnesses. And maybe, just maybe, a third option no one had seen coming. Rylan sat across from Captain Alira Nomu at the old wooden table that had once served as a food prep station, a comm relay platform, and once briefly a makeshift wrestling ring during a misunderstanding with a particularly aggressive Lisseri courier. Now it had the noble role of holding 3 mismatched mugs and a datapad full of political jargon. He sipped from his mug, made a face, and glanced inside. You're sure this is tea? It's fermented cactus leaf, Sal said from the corner, where she was recalibrating the ship's thermal dampeners by whispering arcane nonsense into the diagnostics module. Technically, it's alive. It might judge you. I'm getting that vibe, Rylan muttered, setting the mug down before the drink decided to test his dental integrity. Captain Nomu didn't touch hers. She was too busy scrolling through the datapad, expression swinging somewhere between fascinated and existentially disturbed. So, just so I understand, you bonded to her through a non-consensual ceremonial transfer, then refused the bond, then decided to keep her, then set up domestic defenses against her people, and now you're dating? Whoa, Rylan said, raising both hands. There was no keeping? She stayed. I suggested several exits, even drew a little map. Sal glanced up. It was upside down. I said I'm bad at drawing maps. Also, Sal added, standing now, we're not dating. That's true, Rylan said. There was a long conversation involving pillows and boundaries. She has a strong stance against feet touching in sleep proximity. Nomu blinked slowly. I can't tell if this is a relationship or a sitcom. Why not both? Rylan said. We have laugh tracks built into the toaster. The toaster only laughs at physical pain, Sal said helpfully. Nomu sighed and leaned back in her chair. Do you know what this means? You've just created a completely new diplomatic category. The Federation's going to need a name for this. Rylan pointed at her with his mug. Make it something classy, like accidental covenant cohabitation with cross-species implications. Sal nodded. Or weirdos with feelings. That's already a Lissari punk band, Nomu said. I saw them live once on Calliope Station. Screamed about Moss for 3 hours. The console pinged suddenly, breaking the rhythm of their accidental comedy hour. Sal crossed the room and tapped into the feed. Her fingers slowed after a moment. Another signal from orbit, she said. Encrypted in ceremonial dialect. Nomu stood quickly. Let me see. Sal adjusted the display and stepped aside. The screen showed a glyph, intertwined spirals with a black sun at the center. Nomu frowned. I don't know that one. I do, Sal said. It's not a threat. It's a petition from within the temple itself. A rebellion? Rylan asked. A question, Sal replied. They want to hear my voice. Outside the high circles. They want a broadcast. Nomu raised an eyebrow. You're going to live stream your ideology? It's more like spiritual karaoke, Rylan said, with slightly more orbital risk. Sal turned toward them, and for a rare moment, her calm shifted into something brighter. She looked like she belonged in front of that screen, not as a fugitive, but as someone being called to speak. I'll do it, she said. Nomu rubbed her temples. All right, but we do this carefully. Federation channels only. Contain stream. If the High Priestess tries to jam the signal, I can pull clearance to override. Rylan cleared his throat. I volunteer to do the tech stuff. I'm great at pointing at screens and pretending I know what they mean. No offense, Nomu said, but if you break my broadcast gear, I will staple you to a satellite. Sal smiled faintly. He's better under pressure. Rylan raised his mug again. That's not tea, he whispered to it. That's courage. Hours passed in a rhythm of preparation. Sale stood in front of the repurposed scanner array, modified by Nomu to beam signal directly to Lasari cultural relays scattered across the system. Rylan rewired the auxiliary array 3 times. The toaster offered itself as a sacred host and was rejected on philosophical grounds. Finally, everything was ready. Sale stepped forward. The air around her shimmered faintly, residual energy from the glyph she'd drawn across her skin with echo ink, symbols glowing just beneath the surface like faint constellations. She took a deep breath, and the signal began. Her voice started soft, not in any language known to human systems, but in Lasari root verse, older than syntax, woven in rhythm and intent. Nomu translated in real time through sublingual feed. Rylan watched from the console, completely still. "I am Saline of the unbroken thread," her voice echoed. "I have seen the stars from outside your sanctuary. I have heard truth spoken without translation. I do not return to destroy. I return to invite." Her words turned to melody, then to silence. The signal cut. Everyone stared at the screens. Then one by one, glyphs lit up across the display. Responses from temples and enclaves, from ships in hiding and scholars in orbit. Dozens, hundreds. Then one final one. The black sun again, but this time ringed in gold. Sile looked to Nomu. "She's coming," Sile said. "Viralis." Rylan stood beside her. "Then we better start planning," he said, "because I don't think she's coming to harmonize." Sile touched the console, one finger on the final glyph. Number, "She's coming to end something." Nomu straightened her jacket. "Then we'll make sure she doesn't end everything." The toaster beeped twice. Apparently it was ready for war. The moment the Lasari mothership pierced the stratosphere, every bird within 100 kilometers decided it was someone else's sky now. The thing didn't so much land as descend with ominous purpose, an obsidian crescent blotting out half the morning. Rylan stared up from the porch, shielding his eyes with one hand, coffee mug in the other, and muttered, "Well, there goes our property value." "Technically," Sale said beside him, calm as ever, "this land was never zoned for diplomatic apocalypse." The air shimmered with gravitational distortion as the mothership extended a narrow beam to the clearing just beyond the perimeter. Rylan noted the ceremonial plating along its side, script etched in rotating fractal code, the kind that told stories to those who could read them. Nomu appeared from behind the cabin, dressed in her formal uniform, which was only slightly wrinkled from her impromptu nap in the drone shed. "I hope you two have something resembling a plan," she said, "because I just finished updating my will and added a clause about vengeful space matriarchs." "We talk," Sale said. "And if she doesn't want to talk," Rylan asked, "then I improvise." Rylan shot her a look. "You hate improvising." "I've been observing humans," she said. "You make it look chaotic, but oddly effective. I'll take that as a compliment." It wasn't. Viralis emerged first, taller than memory, her robes woven with kinetic silk that shimmered in defiance of local physics. Her ears were longer than Sale's, each tipped with crystalline cuffs that pulsed faintly, likely with enough psionic charge to cook a cow. Flanking her were 4 temple guards with ceremonial blades that hummed in sympathy with the soil. Sale stepped forward alone. "Daughter of Thread," Viralis said, voice carrying like a chime in a cathedral. "You stand upon fractured ground." "I made it through," Sale replied, "without unraveling. You abandoned the path. You desecrated the covenant. I challenged it." Rylan watched from the sidelines, fingers twitching near the console trigger. He wasn't planning to start a war, but he definitely wasn't above deploying the smoke cannon he rigged from an old water heater and a spice rack. "Your words reached many," Viralis said. "Some even listened. Because I told the truth. That you bonded with a human. That I chose." Viralis's eyes narrowed. "He is mortal. So am I." There was silence, the kind that felt like it stretched across stars. "You would bind yourself to decay?" Rylan cleared his throat loudly. "Hey, not to interrupt your dramatic space eldritch dialogue, but I have most of my teeth, and I floss." Sale smiled faintly. "I didn't choose him for longevity," she said. "I chose him because he listened. Because he saw me. Not what I represent. And what do you represent now, Salin? Viralis asked. Sale took a breath. Change. The word hung in the air like a signal flare. The guards didn't move. Viralis didn't blink. Then something shifted. A ripple of golden light echoed from Viralis's cuffs. Her hands lowered. You speak with clarity. I learned it from Earth news anchors. And from him, she added, glancing at Rylan. Viralis turned her gaze to him. Human. You would tether yourself to one marked by exile? I've been called worse, Rylan said. Usually by ex-girlfriends or coffee machines. Nomu sighed. I should have brought popcorn. Viralis's lips curved, barely, but it was there. A flicker of emotion, amusement perhaps, or a memory. You are unusual. So I've been told. She looked back at Sael. If you walk this path, it cannot be undone. I know. And you accept exile from the high circuit. I redefine what it means. Viralis raised her hands. The cuffs glowed, once, then dimmed. Then walk it. The temple guards turned as one, and with no further spectacle, they returned to the beam. The mothership pulled them upward like dust drawn into a storm. Moments later, the sky was just sky again. Rylan let out a long breath. That went alarmingly well. Nomu blinked. I feel like we just disarmed a nuclear warhead with interpretive dance. She let me go, Sale said quietly. No, Rylan said. She saw you let yourself go. There's a difference. The days that followed were quiet, almost suspiciously so. The cabin became less of a hideout and more of a home. Nomu eventually left. Promotions secured, report filed, and, allegedly, a full-page editorial in Galactic Affairs Weekly titled Love in the Time of Plasma Diplomacy. The Federation reached out. So did several Lycery enclaves, cautiously curious about Sale's new philosophy. She taught remotely, then later in person. Never doctrine, just perspective, the kind that came with scar tissue and starlight. Rylan learned how to properly cook Lycery root stew without triggering a minor allergic reaction. He also installed a real climate stabilizer, though the toaster claimed responsibility. One evening, Sale stood beneath the open sky, eyes tracing constellations only she could name. Rylan came to stand beside her. You miss them? He asked. Sometimes. I'm glad you stayed. I never really thought of it as staying, she said. I moved forward. He nodded. So, no regrets. She turned to him, brushing hair behind her pointed ear. Only that I didn't choose sooner. They stood together in silence, stars above and soil beneath. No ceremony, no war, just peace, and a story not etched in law, but lived in laughter and stubborn affection. And somewhere deep in orbit, the toaster sent a ping to a coffee machine on Mars. The message simply read, "It worked."